And I remember looking at a house that probably had some great bones behind it and underneath some of the newer finishes. But my husband and even my family were like, no, we are not taking that on.
Welcome to Book Therapy. I'm your host, Kim Patton. There's no way to count how many books are floating around in this world. Some are decent, some are truly terrible, and some are great. Today we're going to take a deep dive into one great book. Together we will discover gems of truth and encouragement to help you face your current season of life. I'm ready, you're ready, let's get this party started. Hello friends, thank you so much for joining me here today. I have another great episode for you, and this one is super shareable. The book we talk about is written by a couple who has been on TV for several years, and many people know them. So if you have a friend who is obsessed with this couple, send them this episode. I think they'll really enjoy it because they'll see a different side to this couple that they've never seen before, and you will get credit for thinking about them, and you'll look like a really good friend. And I'm sure you are. Enjoy the show. Let's dive into the book. Today I have a return guest, a fan favorite actually, because this guest starred in the episode that has the most listens so far in book therapy history. So welcome back to the show, Peggy.
Why, thank you. You guys are so kind.
What can I say? The people love you. Peggy lives in Florida with her husband, and they are in baby moon land prepping for their daughter to be born in January. Because she works as a design coordinator for a construction company, we're going to talk today about the Magnolia story by Joanna and Chip Gaines. Peggy, I know this couple is wildly popular, but tell me a little bit about them and why you are fascinated by this book.
Well, Chip and Joanna Gaines are from Waco, Texas. I've actually visited once. It is a very quaint little town in the middle of nowhere. It's very industrial, and they have spent their career rebuilding and revamping Waco, Texas, and turning it into a beautiful place. So this book is all about their story, about how they got started in their business, how they met and fell in love, and it's just fabulous.
So, did you like the back and forth of like Joanna's voice and then Chip's, coming in and saying, "Oh, I didn't remember that I left the child at home."
Yes, I loved it. It was really good. Joanna writes most of it, but then you get it's a lot like the show, their Fixer Upper show, where you get the serious from Joanna, and then Chip comes in with the one-liners and just lightens it up. It's pretty great.
Have you seen on the show Chip eating strange animals like dead cockroaches?
I feel like I've seen that episode, or maybe there's more than one. I'm not sure.
I know Joanna mentions that that's probably one of the things that not got them the show, but when they started filming, she's like, this is Chip all the time. I mean, this isn't like he's doing this for TV. This is him picking up a cockroach off the floor and saying, who's going to give me 20 bucks if I eat this kind of thing.
Disgusting, but also very entertaining.
Chip and Joanna are all about that work. Okay. So, first of all, we're going to talk about how Chip and Joanna work hard. And when I say work hard, I mean work their butts off. Like, these are probably two of the hardest workers on the planet. I don't know when they sleep, to be honest. I mean, they run a family, they have 5 kids and a business, and they had that TV show for so long. And they kept everything going, but in this book they reveal a lot about the behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, get it, they had a TV show behind the scenes, the behind the scenes of what some of their struggles were. And I was surprised a lot by their financial struggle, so we'll get into that. So Chip, he's been an entrepreneur for years. In the book he talks about in high school selling scantrons to students, which is not a bad idea. I think my brother sold Jolly Ranchers at school. He had a bag full of, Jolly Ranchers that he bought for super cheap. And then he would just sell them to students for a quarter or whatever. And so he made money in high school doing that. So the Scantron thing made me think of that.
Yeah, he was definitely a hard worker and always on the move for just a new idea, a new project, a new way to make money. His brain, I don't think, ever stops.
You're right. Chip is he's the business guy, I would say. Like, wasn't he like the mayor, quote unquote, mayor of his little town because he owned all of these properties and these places that the
Mm.
college students would live?
There was a little street that he
Yeah.
basically owned. He kept buying more and more pieces of property. And eventually, I mean, he would just take his four-wheeler around and ride it around. He knew everybody that lived there. He was probably the landlord for everybody that lived there. And slowly but surely they really did take over a little bit of the town.
So that was where he got started, was managing properties, and that's how they kind of got into the business. Even with that, even with his successful entrepreneurial endeavors, they struggled financially. Joanna talks a lot about the debt that they accrued before. These were the years before the TV show, when I mean, when you're investing in real estate, you're putting down a lot of money, or you're investing in something that is dependent on the market or dependent on what someone will pay for it. So you can kind of get in trouble. And they did get in trouble a few times. And they tell really cool stories of how God brought them through those moments. But I'll read a quote on page 86. Joanna says, "Don't get me wrong, juggling that sort of entrepreneurial career with four little kids was not easy. It seemed that no matter how hard we worked, no matter how many extra jobs we picked up, we were still barely scraping by and living with huge amounts of debt. Chip never stopped pulling crazy stunts, and each time I'd get just as angry over them as I had gotten when he left Drake home alone those two times in his first few months." Chip didn't know what to do with the newborn baby. He kind of forgot that you had to take it with him when you left the house. So that's probably my favorite story of the whole book, is the couple times that he forgot his firstborn son at home when Joanna wasn't there. But the crazy thing about this is Chip went out and was Chip. And not that Joanna had to pick up the slack, because that's not how she describes it. She just says that there was a lot going on and it was hard to juggle everything. So tell me about the Magnolia shop that Joanna started, and just her perspective of when she knew it was time to move on, and this is how the whole dream for her got started. So tell me, Peggy, about the Magnolia shop.
Yeah, so as Chip was renovating houses and buying new properties, each time they would buy a new house, Joanna would fix it up. And a lot of times they would move into this new house that they were fixing up and they would move on from there. And as she was doing this, she kind of learned her love of design. And eventually she kind of picked up Chip's maybe risk-taking side and fell in love with this pretty ugly looking building. I've actually been there, the original Magnolia store. And they ended up purchasing it. There's a sweet story about that. Every story, I feel like, has some sort of really sweet relational piece to it where they just people believed in them. And so
Mm-hmm.
then Joanna begins selling home goods out of this little store, and she's wildly successful. And then people start to ask her for design opinions. And so it really begins to develop her side of the business.
And she ran that for a few years on her own. And then she got pregnant with Drake, the firstborn. And she was able to kind of manage the shop when she was nursing him and carrying him on the carrier. And I've been there. You're about to be there, where the
Hmm.
the baby is an appendage of you, is what they say. They're like a part of your body, and you carry them around like a third arm. So it worked, but she did feel after a little while that, okay, maybe there's something I need to be doing. And she didn't really like that feeling, but what did she do with that feeling?
This is probably one of my favorite parts of the her story, particularly, is she felt just really strong peace that it was time to close up the shop. Even though it was going terribly well, she was gaining a lot of ground and a lot of notoriety in the community about her design, and but she felt at peace that it was time to close the store. I recently in my own life kind of closed the door on a season, not because it wasn't going well, not because I didn't like what I was doing, but because I feel like I had a similar piece that it was time to close that chapter up. And that's what's led me into my new role, which is way more flexible, which was what Joanna needed. She wanted to be home with her kids. She didn't want to be stuck in the store. She wanted her, to be home. And so, anyways, it's just really cool because if you know anything about Chip and Joanna Gaines, clearly her store has come back around. It's not only in Waco, Texas, bigger and better than ever before at the silos, but it's even in Target and, they have an online store. And so it was really, really cool to see that she trusted God for what she could understand at the time. She trusted him. Not only did that fuel her into the future where she was designing and helping Chip with his side of the business, but later on, that thing that she was thriving in so well came back around in a bigger and better way. So it was just very encouraging to me that sometimes God shuts a door, but it's not in vain. Like he's going to use it.
I like how you said peace because we really can't make those decisions without peace. And there's times in our life where we're struggling to make a decision and you just go with what gives you peace. And sometimes it's just a really tiny sliver of, hey, yeah, it's time. And you're like, really? Are you sure? But that's what we have to go on is we have to trust the leading. Secondly, Joanna especially has crafted her life around working with beauty. Let's just say I'm not a design coordinator. If you walked into my house, you would say, "Oh, that woman has different talents." I know your job deals with design elements of making a space beautiful, making a space homey, making things work, whether it's colors or texture or walls. I mean, you've painted your indoor walls in various homes probably 50 times. So you are a painting expert, you are a design expert. And I want you to tell me a little bit about what Joanna sees in this old, new, classic versus, the hot new color. On page 116, Joanna is talking about how the houses in Waco had a lot of history. And because they were built 100 years ago, they had really good bones. She says the little nuances in the woodwork, the framing of the doors, the built in nooks, the windows, all had been done by smart, talented people. And I quickly found that uncovering those details and all of that character made the house more inviting and more attractive and more alive. Chip weighs in. He says a lot of modern houses in the suburbs are big and beautiful. And I don't want to run anyone down, but when you look closely, it's almost like a beautiful woman with a little too much makeup on. Our Castle Heights home seemed to just get more and more beautiful the more Joanna wiped the makeup away. I think that is so interesting. Tell me what you think.
Well, as a Floridian, I will say that you used to live in the suburban, too much makeup um, type of place. So I'm a little jealous of Joanna. There aren't too many bones, at least in the houses that I've lived in, to be wiped away. And in fact, my husband and I just moved maybe in the last 6 months. And I remember looking at a house that probably had some great bones behind it and underneath some of the newer finishes. But my husband and even my family were like, no, we are not taking that on. So, anyways, but in Waco, where these two live, there are a lot of really old homes, and it was really cool to watch. When I say watch, I should say read through Joanna's journey of how she even kind of came to the place where we would like recognize her style and her design, even manifesto, if you want to say that, right? That she's really wiping away some of these makeup off older homes and really bringing out history. That wasn't an original kind of thing for her. Some of that came out of necessity. These homes that she was working with at the beginning were very tiny, and so bringing in beauty was going to be difficult, adding on. But if she took things away and brought out what was already there, it became a much more beautiful place. It's definitely in her and Chip. They both like old things. They talked about it even on their honeymoon, going out into the country and seeing the old silos and the old barns, and they both have a love for that. But it definitely was through time that she realized this. And I think one of the other things that was really cool is that anybody who's into design, there's something about the visual, right? You want things to look perfect and in their place. And throughout time, as she had kids, she kind of wrestled and dealt with, she wanted her house to always be perfect. And so she was always frustrated or mad with her kids or with Chip because like they were making a mess and they were ruining this beautiful space that she had created. And oftentimes even her house became the showroom that people would come to see. And then over time, after a couple of houses of moving and redesigning, she kind of realized that she needed to design with them in mind and create spaces for them to be and not to have to like be perfect little individuals. Because let's be real,
Mhm.
Chip's definitely not going to do that, and the kids are definitely not going to do that. And so I really appreciate that. Like I love that about her heart is that she wants to A, bring, just show what beauty's already there, and then B, make it functional, something that you can live in, that you don't have to like worry about the spills, worry about just the day-to-day things, that she's really kind of mastered putting functionality and beauty together.
How has your design lens changed in the since you've been at this job? Like what you previously thought was beautiful now as you're working with homes and working with actual spaces, and now that you moved and you're in a new house, how has your design taste change?
Yeah, I would say for me, mine is I don't know if like my taste has changed necessarily. I mean, I've become older and more mature. It was cute. My friend the other day, I showed her what curtains I was purchasing for my home, and she said, "Oh, it's married Peg. It's mature married Peg. It's not the kid who I used to have like bright orange chevron curtains
Orange.
in
I was
my
gonna
old house.
say
I know.
orange for sure.
So these are like floral and definitely a little bit more mature. And so, I mean, that's age. I don't know that like my job has necessarily really changed my style per se. I think just time and, trends change. But I also will say that it takes a lot of skill, and I'm not there yet in my job. I haven't been doing it very long, but it takes a lot of skill to really be able to visualize, like where do you take the risk and where do you play it simple. And so I know Joanna, just like I am doing now, had to go through that journey of like, let me try this, let me try that, what goes together. I think she has a much better natural talent than I do, but regardless.
Speaking of trends, she says on page 118, I started hanging baskets on the walls and then baskets with plates in them. I hung antique gates up to add texture, along with interesting pieces of wood, branches, and other things you might not normally expect to see on a wall. Now, some of you know this, but in 2020, Peggy casually mentioned to me that she wanted to sell her house. Her and Reed were thinking of selling the house, and they had renters in there and they were living elsewhere. I looked at her and I had Eden in my lap, and we were on a walk at nature preserve. And I said, Kevin and I really like your house. Would you consider selling it to us?
It was the orange chevron curtains. I was
There
kidding.
was an orange dresser too. I remember orange was a thing. And you kind of looked up at the sky and you were like, I mean, yeah, I'll talk to Reed about it. We can consider it. So Kevin and I bought her house in 2020. We moved in around Thanksgiving. There were baskets on the wall in the living room.
Mhm.
Was that your doing? Was that
That is true. I cannot say that it was Joanna inspired, but yes, I had done that.
you may say that you're not an expert, or you may say that you have a lot to learn, which of course, we all do. But just to see that Joanna was talking about 3D objects on the wall. I mean, I can say personally that I don't think about stuff like that. I mean, you look at my walls and you will wonder what I'm thinking. So the fact that you guys do have that talent, I just think it's something to be appreciated. And the world always needs more beauty, and the world is we're attracted to beauty. So we appreciate you. Lastly, Chip and Joanna work together. She talks a lot in the book about all that they have been through. And holy cow, they have been through a lot, from the story of how Fixer Upper came to be when the TV crew came to them and started recording as a potential for a TV show. Chip and Joanna did not even own a TV. And it was the day that Chip had bought a houseboat that
Y'all, this
leaked.
story. No, it wasn't even a leak, Kim. It was like, it was uninhabitable. It was not that it was just leaking. It was terrible. And that is like But you have to read this book, if nothing else, for that
And
story.
Joanna came around and they were hugging it
Mhm.
out. And, she had been so mad when he just, the trailer pulls up and just drops a houseboat on their lawn. And Chip is like, oh, yeah, I bought this. And Joanna's like, what the H are you thinking, husband? And he's just like, no, it'll be
Oh,
cool. So she goes in and she kind of looks around and she's just still thinking like, my husband. Where's
which
the
they didn't have any money for this. Like, it was insane.
it was kind of a disaster, but the story is inspiring because it shows you I don't even know how it's inspiring because it's just too wild. Like if I'm going to be that mad, I'm not coming down. I'm not coming around. Like no. I'm not that holy. So, but she does and they caught it all on tape and they said, "Listen, you guys are totally in." And Chip and Joanna are like, oh, we forgot you were even there. We were just arguing about a houseboat and then, talking about what we're gonna do with it. So,
They were an amazing team, though, truly, and still are. It's crazy. The end of their book, they just literally talk about how they wouldn't be where they are if it wasn't for each other. They brought out the best in each other. There's so many times where Chip's risk taking is too much, and Joanna is there to kind of save the day. Chip believes in Joanna and like really pushes her in her gifts and talents because she's like the introvert and she's not a risk taker, and so he really sees her potential and just pushes her forward. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful.
there's nobody like them. I mean, I'm fascinated by humans, period. But there's nobody like
Not you,
Chip
Kim.
and Joanna.
Oh man.
On page 148, Joanna is talking about how they were going through a tough season and she shifted her perspective. She says, I didn't want to look back at this experience and regret how I handled it. I wanted to say, win or lose, that we believed in love, that we had faith, and in essence, we fought the good fight. I didn't want to be found a quitter or a doubter. None of these things would have been helpful to Chip anyway. So even though I didn't feel it some days, and even though I shed my fair share of tears, I woke up every day and told myself, we can do this. God has not brought us this far to let us down now. And I would tell Chip, you got this. Most guys would collapse under this pressure, but you were built for this. Ooh, okay. Tear jerker.
I know, right? I was so convicted by the end of this book, asking myself the question, am I a really good teammate for my husband? Am I a good cheerleader? Do I pull out the best in him? I was really convicted. Like it was sweet, but I was just challenged to be better. It's so easy to see the negative in the people that you live closest with, and they just always brought out the best in each other. And so I don't know. I walked away being like, all right, yeah, you guys are awesome, but also like I can be better.
Right. Thanks, Joanna. That's a real kick in the
Hmm.
pants. I like how she said I shed my fair share of tears because I don't know about you, but whenever I hear people talking about how much they're crying over things, I feel a little bit better because I'm going through a season where there's a lot of tears. And to hear her say, even though she didn't feel it and even though she shed some tears, she told herself, we can do this. God has not brought us this far to let us down now. And that's not saying that God is going to, pull through and make everything easy or whatever. We know better than that. But the fact that he's not going to let us down, he's been with us this far. He's not going anywhere. He's right by our side. He's going to help me, give me the strength to do exactly what he's called me to do. And I feel that. I feel that every day. I feel that his mercies are new every morning. They are brand spanking new. They kind of fade in the afternoon. His mercies aren't new every afternoon, just the morning. But every morning we get that boost. And every morning I believe in myself a little bit more than I did the day before. And that is my faith in him being strengthened every day because he keeps showing up. So that means
Mhm.
I don't get a day off either. I'm going to keep showing up.
Yeah. And right, I think as we get older, Kim and I, we're super old over here. So, but anyways, all that to say, like as you get older, there are, especially the longer you walk with God, there's more and more things you can look back on your life. Like Kim, you guys buying our house is now one of those things in my life, and there's been things before that and things after that that now when I face a hard challenge, when I'm worried about the future, when I'm like not sure how things are going to work out, you can look back on these things.
I like how Chip also talks about his side of the story on page 149. He says, when things come against us, we can either turn on each other or we can come together and turn on it. And he talks about how when things were just so low, that's when they really stuck together. And that's when they shoulder to shoulder faced it. And I think that says a lot about him taking his wife along on this journey. I mean, he's the leader of the home, but he doesn't leave her hanging. We talked about how Chip and Joanna work hard, how they work with beauty, and how they work together. And Peggy already mentioned this, but in the end, the book really comes full circle when Joanna's dream of having the Magnolia shop and designing and working with clients and meeting people and connecting people with beauty and with antique items turns into the silos and the show and all of the 50 things that they do on a regular basis to make Waco a better town and to make the world a better place. On page 178, Joanna says, thousands of people showed up when we opened Magnolia Market at the Silos in October of 2015, and they haven't stopped coming ever since. Talk about coming full circle. If I ever needed proof that I should trust God with my dreams, this was certainly it. He turned my little dream, my mustard seed of faith, into all this. Not even a decade after I made that difficult decision to close my shop to stay home with my babies, God delivered on the promise of making my dreams come true in ways that were bigger than I ever imagined. I guess having your pillows in Target is pretty much the biggest dream of
That's
all
the
time.
ultimate, yeah, that's the ultimate dream.
So, Peggy, anything else you want to say about our lovely Chip and Joanna as we wrap it up?
I would just say if you haven't read this story, I think you should. It is a great reminder of perseverance, of working together, of what it looks like to have a simple faith. You know, I think sometimes we overcomplicate what it looks like to walk with God. And Chip and Joanna are just honest people who know that God is real and they allow him into their decision making, and it's just beautiful. So if I'm honest, Kim, I don't think I've told you this, but when you said let's read the Magnolia story, in my mind it was Joanna's new story, her new
Oh,
memoir.
yeah.
And so when I got it from the bookstore, they had to order it for me. I was like, oh, I really thought it was the new book about Joanna, particularly and like her perspective. But this was so timely. And I don't think there's a person who couldn't walk away from this and be encouraged about your own story and your own life and how God is working. So I highly recommend, even though it wasn't the book that I expected to read.
Well, we'll just have to circle back next year and read Joanna's book together. Thank you, design coordinator slash best friend slash why are you in Florida and I'm in Georgia? I will never understand, but I'm at peace with it. There you go. Talk about full circle. I'm at peace with this. But thank you so much for joining us and for talking about such a unique book that had qualities that you could really speak into. And I just really appreciate having your perspective.
It was a blast. I love it.
You'll be if you get to my number one and my number two slot, I'll definitely consider hiring you on full
Share,
time.
like, and subscribe.
So, Peggy, we will see you again.
That's great. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Book Therapy. Once again, we talked about the Magnolia story by Chip and Joanna Gaines. If you would like to get the book, you can visit my website, kimpatton.com, and the link will be there for you. See you next time. Who's the newest hot read, Peggy?
Oh, my husband.
It sounds so cheesy sometimes. So I'm like, this is my favorite part.
This is Kim's favorite part. It actually was one of mine too.